Imagine this for a second. An entire country's travel network, the lifeblood of its economy, just stops. Not because of a storm, not because of a security scare, but because of a catastrophic failure from deep within the system itself. Well, that's exactly what happened in December 2025, when India's aviation sector faced an absolute meltdown. So let's dig into how it all went so wrong.
Right, so the timing, you literally couldn't have picked a worse moment. We're talking December 2025, the absolute peak of the holiday travel season. You've got families trying to get together, businesses wrapping up the year, millions of people depending on the airlines to get them where they need to go.
And then, bam, total chaos. In just 4 days, over 1,000 flights are just gone from the departure boards. IndiGo, the country's biggest airline, saw its on-time performance, something they're usually really proud of, plummet to below 10%. Airports just turned into this sea of confused, angry, stranded passengers. The whole system didn't just bend, it broke. So we have to ask, how does a modern, massive aviation network get brought to its knees that fast? Well, the answer is a real perfect storm. You had two completely separate crises, one that popped up overnight and another that had been simmering for years, and they collided at the worst possible time. Okay, so let's start with the immediate trigger, the thing that lit the fuse, a sudden, completely paralyzing pilot shortage that hit the nation's biggest airline. And the culprit was this, a new set of safety rules called FDTL. Now, these rules came from a good place, right? They were all about fighting pilot fatigue by making rest periods stricter, a really necessary move for safety for sure. But the way it was rolled out, well, it had these massive, unintended consequences that nobody seemed to be ready for. And what's wild is how fast it all fell apart. It was like a domino effect. Step 1, the new rules go live. Instantly, step 2, you have pilots who are supposed to be flying who are now legally out of hours. They can't fly. That just shatters the airline's crew schedules, which are planned with military precision. And from there, it's just a chain reaction of cancellations spreading across the entire country. And this wasn't just a few bad rosters or a computer glitch. People on the inside were calling it a complete scheduling collapse. That tells you this was a systemic failure, an inability to prepare for a huge regulatory change that, let's be honest, everyone knew was coming. But believe it or not, this was only half the story. So while that pilot crisis was the trigger, the whole system was already incredibly fragile. We need to peel back another layer and look at the sickness that had been growing for years. A really serious flaw in the engines that powered a huge chunk of India's entire fleet.
So, meet the Pratt Whitney GTF engine. On paper, this thing was a game changer. It promised incredible fuel savings, it was way quieter, it was the future. But the reality for a lot of airlines was a total nightmare. We're talking faulty parts, weird vibrations, and a long history of grounded planes, not just in India, but all over the world.
And here's the thing. This wasn't a new problem, not even close. This very same engine flaw had already written the final chapter for another Indian airline in a slow-motion disaster. Just look at this timeline for Go First. It is absolutely brutal. It starts back in 2017 with a few planes grounded. The problems just keep getting worse. By 2022, half of their entire fleet is just sitting on the tarmac, unable to fly. A year later, they're bankrupt, and they're pointing the finger squarely at Pratt Whitney for their collapse.
So why did Go First go under while IndiGo managed to stay in the air? This simple chart says it all. It comes down to one word: scale. IndiGo's fleet was just so much bigger. They had this massive operational buffer. They could have a few dozen planes grounded and still keep the network running. But by December 2025, after years of these engine problems chipping away at their fleet, that buffer was gone. There was no safety net left.
Now you have to understand, this chaos didn't stay contained at the airport. The ripple effects were felt across the entire country, messing with everything from family vacations to critical supply chains. This was a national disruption. And the knock-on effect was just immense. Your holiday plans? Poof, gone. That critical business trip? Canceled. The roads and metros heading to airports were completely gridlocked. And think about cargo. Anything time-sensitive, from fresh food to urgent packages, was delayed for days. Even the airline's websites and apps couldn't handle the traffic from desperate passengers, and they just crashed. But this right here, this is the real cost. It's not about the logistics or the numbers, it's about the missed weddings, the blown job interviews, the families stranded and literally sleeping on the terminal floor with their kids with no idea what was going on. That's the real human impact. Okay, so the system is broken.
how do you even begin to rebuild from a crisis of this scale? Well, the response was a mix of short-term emergency fixes and a really significant long-term shift in strategy.
The government had to step in, fast. They put temporary caps on airfares to stop airlines from jacking up prices. And then, in a really controversial move, they actually rolled back that new FDTL rule temporarily, just as a desperate measure to get crews flying again. But everyone knew these were just band-aids. The real, long-term fix had to be a fundamental pivot towards self-reliance.
Get a load of this number, 85%. That is how much of India's critical aircraft maintenance and repair work was being sent abroad. This created this massive dependency. It was expensive, it took forever, and as this whole engine crisis proved, it was a huge strategic weakness. But this crisis, it was a wake-up call. It forced a major change in thinking. The focus shifted dramatically toward building a domestic ecosystem for MRO, that's maintenance, repair, and overhaul. The goal was simple: bring that critical work and the control that comes with it back home to India.
And this isn't just some plan on a piece of paper, it is happening. Take a look at this brand new Safran facility in Hyderabad. It's now the world's largest repair shop for a whole different family of engines, the CFM LEAP engines. The goal here is to handle almost all of this work right here in India. That means slashing costs, getting planes back in the air way faster, and building that self-sufficiency the country so desperately needs.
Look, the meltdown of December 2025 was a brutal, brutal lesson. It exposed just how vulnerable this incredibly fast-growing industry was. The path forward is all about building a stronger, more resilient system from the ground up. But it leaves you with this one big question. Was this crisis just a freak accident, a perfect storm, or was it a terrifying preview of what happens when a system's ambition and growth completely outpace its ability to handle a crisis?